Thank you to the organization, the European Connected Health Alliance, for inviting me to share this panel with experts in digital health. I think it's a very good opportunity to talk about mental health, digital health, and well-being. Fascinating topics. And as you can hear or see, I am a Catalan Spanish with a strong accent, trying to speak English, but I try to do my best. First of all, I will show you a video. It's a couple of minutes in order to frame what Mental Health Catalonia cluster is. It's a hub for business development and innovation. And if the video works.
The fear and uncertainty of a world in crisis. The long months of the pandemic have caused much of the population's mental health to suffer. Now, more than ever, mental health is a global health challenge, and it demonstrates the need to invest our resources in all areas. To face this challenge, a holistic and transversal approach is needed. One that allows comprehensive support to be offered to those who have suffered from disorders of the central nervous system throughout their lives, and which also covers biological, psychological, and social aspects. We're talking about an approach that integrates mental health, neuroscience, and aging, in which all actors work together. Collaboration and innovation among the different actors who take part in the mental health value chain are key to its success. This, as well as transversality. The Mental Health Cluster Catalonia is the platform upon which this can become a reality. Currently, the Mental Health Cluster Catalonia brings together more than 18% of Catalan companies in the field of mental health, neurosciences, and aging. Collectively, the sector has a turnover of more than 7 billion euros. It employs more than 32,000 workers, and in 2018 represented 2.82% of Catalan GDP. The Mental Health Cluster Catalonia, as an innovative business group, is the perfect space in which to improve competitiveness, creativity, and talent. An instrument that furthers innovation through project implementation. The platform on which market intelligence and knowledge converge. An actor that connects people, organizations, and technologies.
Okay, and how we do that? We have different tools. One of them is a journal that the cluster publishes with a contents. The DNA of this journal is digitalization, innovation, and research. It stands for business, research, aging, innovation, neuroscience, and in 2021, we have incorporated the letter S. Because for us, social knowledge, social science, social perspectives, for example, social work, social education, culture, leisure, are capital in the mental health. So in this journal, we're incorporating this knowledge in order to grow our perspective on the mental health in general. If you have a look to the top 20 startups around the world, in the description, the more funded startups in the last 4 years, you can see that in the world map, the most used words are platform and patients. And other words would be support, would be access, would be technology, would be digital, therapy, treatment. So this means that the population, the patients, are searching for digital technological approach and also they want to be accessible to the specialists and the professionals. Another product, another important project that we are developing currently is a living lab called CALL, that stands for Care Autonomy Living Lab. This is an initiative that this aim is finally to apply disruptive innovation, technological, digital, and social disruptive innovation to the population. The partners integrated in this living lab represents the quadruple innovation helix. That means research centers and universities, on the other hand, public and private companies. Another would be administration and policy makers, and stakeholders, clients, users, population, citizens. The model of this living lab pursues to be a co-creation in order to develop products, services, tailored use in the use centers in order to be able to give answers to the challenges and needs that the patients and the citizens are facing currently. How do we do this? In an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary perspective, because the mental health, as you know, we approach from a biopsychosocial educative model. So it's important the collaboration between all the partners, and the contents are in the field of mental health, aging, and neuroscience. Why is Mental Health Catalonia cluster developing this project? Because we are the only mental health cluster around the world, and we have a large background and knowledge in the field of neuroscience, mental health, and aging. And this living lab will be located in Sant Boi de Llobregat. It's a village, it's a city in the Barcelona's metropolitan area with a large history of mental health, because more than 100 years, because in this city 2 psychiatric hospitals are placed. So this living lab is aimed to gather knowledge, business development, and return to the society. Last but not least, from a clinical perspective, as Julian said, I am a psychiatrist and medical director. I would like to point some key points about the mental health. The COVID-19 pandemic has had an impact, direct and indirectly, in the mental health. The patients suffering from COVID-19, some of them has developed psychiatric symptoms as a comorbidity, but for me, more important is the socioeconomic crisis from the COVID-19 and how our patients and our population are suffering this emotional suffering. Before the pandemic, 1 out of 4 people attending to the primary care was said to suffer from some kind of mental issues. But I think these figures will increase after pandemic, and it will be a very important health problem around the world. Now we are attending patients, teenagers. In the last month, we are increasing the patients, teenagers with self-harm behaviors, suicidal tentatives, OCD, eating disorders, anxiety, and depression disorders. And on the other hand, patients from all ages with previous disorder after COVID-19 and the socioeconomic consequences are worsening his conditions. From my point of view, the approach to the emotional suffering in the population that don't have a mental disorder now but can develop it is from the positive mental health. In my opinion, we have to work with the resilience, because when people face problems or traumatic situations, some of them become more resilient. So we have to work with resilience, with strengths more than weaknesses, and how to manage negative emotions, and also to improve to work with positive emotions like gratitude or kindness, and more important, the social support, because social support is an important perspective in order to have a good mental health. But on the other hand, a bad use of social media in our teenagers, it has a very impacting negative result. At the end of the day, the patients, the population, want to have the right care at the right time and at the right place. And here is, in my opinion, where the technological applications can have and really have a key role. For example, we can think in teletherapy. During the pandemic, the teletherapy has had a very important role to overcome the barriers between the patients and the mental health professionals. Has led to avoid driving, waiting rooms, and and provide a safe environment. But these platforms, it's important the software to comply the protection data regulations. But in my opinion, in my experience, the patients and the mental health professionals are very satisfied. Other possibilities: virtual, augmented reality, collect data, and digital treatments. I will explain after in the discussion time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesc. Thank you very much. Please take a seat here. We will have time to discuss this subject during the discussion. So I'm pleased to welcome Anna now. Please, Anna, if you want to go to your presentation. So Anna is a founder and CEO of Neuroelectrics. She shares her time between Barcelona and Boston. She's an entrepreneur, awarded entrepreneur in Spain and internationally. And you will explain us what is Neuroelectrics, where you come from. You've been working with Starlab here in Barcelona, very well known from different people. So, and what is this therapy, the revolutionary therapy you're proposing? Thank you, Anna, to be there.
Thank you, Julian. Well, it's great to be here. I'm going to talk to you about what I believe is going to be the revolution in brain therapy. I represent Neuroelectrics, an awesome company, by the way, born in Barcelona. So first of all, for those who are out of Barcelona, welcome to our wonderful town. I hope you take away that Barcelona is not only good for living, but good for startups. And you know, we have a fantastic ecosystem. So, yeah. So why do I wake up every morning? I wake up every morning with two pillars, right? A passion for science that my share teams, specifically the science of the brain, and the willingness to have an impact. Why? I mean, 1 of 5 in this room is going to develop some sort of brain disease, be it Alzheimer's, depression. The doctor just talked about the biggest pandemic yet to come is mental health issues, right? How are we going to tackle depression? How are we going to tackle ADHD or Alzheimer's, right? We are aging. So for many of these pathologies, unfortunately, drugs are not working, or we don't yet have a cure, right? So I'm calling out the innovators in the room, the entrepreneurs, to bring innovative solutions, right, to help the millions of patients in need. So now that you're going to listen to me, the brain is, this is the technology that we have developed that you will see in a minute. So this is a really cool technology made and developed in Barcelona. As you're listening to me, the brain is creating electrical signals. It's like an electric storm going on your brain, not only chemically. And these 100 billion neurons are sending messages across each other. We don't even yet know how precisely the brain works. But what we have developed is this technology. So what you can see here is right now my brain, right? The electrical activity of my brain. And this electrical activity can be a very powerful source of diagnostics, right? If you have epilepsy or sleep disorders, they will perform what we call an EEG. But what we are very proud is not only this is a wireless portable technology to monitor your brain, we can use any of the electrodes that I'm wearing to inject little currents into the brain. So why is this important? Because we believe that electrical stimulation can become a new therapy to deal with brain disorders. How does it really work? For example, let's take epilepsy. If you have an epileptic seizure, it's because your brain is hyperexcited, right? Maybe in Alzheimer's, your brain circuitry is not working at optimum, right? So by injecting currents into the brain, we can excite or inhibit neuron activity. So we may help you to reduce your seizures or improve your cognition in Alzheimer's. So this piece of technology is pretty sophisticated because you will see later in the presentation, we can target any area of the brain with multiple electrodes and really get a really amazing effects in therapy. So it's not only the hardware, it's cloud-based, so it can be used at home. That's why I'm so proud to be, not only in 4 years from now, but tomorrow main stage on Mobile World Congress, right? 5G mobile technology is going to allow brain therapy and brain monitoring in ways we couldn't do before, right? So this opens a new window, not only in helping patients, but understanding how the brain works. Let me tell you how we have put this into practice. 6 years ago, our company scaled up from beautiful Barcelona to cold, but really interesting Boston. And by landing in Boston, what we decided is to engage in a clinical trial with the FDA in epilepsy. So there are 60 million patients in the world that suffer from epilepsy, and 1/3 don't respond to medication. So the alternative is surgery. And this is devastating for families because the kids have seizures and there is no cure, right? That is non-invasive. So we took these patients, we started to use our technology, and just to give you a sense of how it works, for every patient we enroll at our study at Boston Children's, we got an EEG similar to what I'm wearing and an MRI of the patient. And what we did with our amazing team is build a 3D model of their brain. In here, the doctor is painting the area that is generating the seizures, the focus. And then we build a 3D model based on your MRI of your own brain. How thick is your scalp? What is the connectivity in your brain? And by building this 3D model of your brain, we can personalize therapies, deciding how many electrodes and how much current do I need to inject to get a desired effect. This is then downloaded at home through our cloud to receive stimulation at home. So pretty awesome piece of technology that is not only kind of swimming cap with cables, right? So these are the results, they are not showing well, in our epilepsy trial. We demonstrated that after 10 days, 20 minutes of stimulation, we reduced seizures 47%. So again, 47% seizure reduction in patients that don't have more alternatives to surgery. So this is amazing. Last week, the FDA declared our technology as breakthrough designation, which is really a stamp that the technology is much needed. And if we succeed in our pivotal trial, we will become the first company in the world with a technology made in Barcelona to really bring a new therapy to the world. So to me, that's like the dream of entrepreneurs, right? We have a vision of something that can help out there, and we gather an amazing team to make it happen. So Again, this is the seizure reduction that I was talking about, 47% after 10 days of stimulation, and now we are doing 200 patients more in 25 US hospitals. So one of the reasons why I am at Mobile World Congress and 4 years from now is because I do truly believe that the future is going home. We have an ongoing depression trial also under the FDA. During the pandemic, we called the FDA and say, listen, patients cannot go to the hospital to receive other sorts of stimulation. Can we send them a device home? And that's good for entrepreneurs. In moments of crisis, agencies like the FDA open mind and also want to innovate. So they allow us to send devices to home of patients. So now we are doing a fully at-home depression trial in the US that would have been impossible to do pre-pandemic times, right? So this is an opportunity to bring these technologies home. We are researching on Alzheimer's. So we are really excited about what we can bring forward. The future, we think it's pretty science fiction. What we are building, we believe, is neurotwin, digital copies of your brain. So you will have a digital copy of your brain that will really help us to personalize treatments in ways we haven't been able to do before. And for that, we just got an ERC grant. The ERC is like the Nobel Prize in Europe of research to really build these neurotwin models for Alzheimer's, for example. So again, we couldn't do this without an amazing team. We will not stop until we help every patient out there in need. We know it's going to take time and effort, but we are super committed. And I just wanted to thank my whole team. I have here Iris, which is my head of marketing, and Pavel, which is my product manager. And we started 2 people the company 10 years ago, but now we have an amazing team of engineers, physicists, mathematicians, neuroscientists. And I just want to say to the entrepreneurs out there that never give up, right? If you have a vision, if you have an idea to make a better world, you just have to work hard on it and make it happen. So thanks for inviting me here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for these very positive messages as well toward the startup community. Thank you for the positive messages you sent. And Hannah is a proof that Barcelona is a real innovative ecosystem and have all the quality to develop great projects and great ideas like yours. We will come back to your project in the discussion. So I'm very pleased to welcome Charlie. Charlie Pearmund is CEO of Virtual Bodyworks. Virtual Bodyworks is a spin-off of the University of Barcelona and the hospital clinic here in Barcelona with different scientists, but I think you will present the team or say a word. You have a background in economics. You've worked in M&A, technology M&A activities. You have raised tons of money for startups as well, so it could be a good contact for you in the room if you're interested. And Charlie is now leading Virtual Bodyworks from here in Barcelona, and you will explain us your concept. Thank you, Charlie, to be there.
Great, thank you, Julian. So, yeah, as Julian mentioned, my area, my interest in mental health comes very much focused on VR, which is very much a growing part of digital health. And what I want to do today is talk a lot about virtual reality and talk about some of the scientific research that's going into virtual reality and where I think it'll take us as it relates to mental health. So some statistics on mental health, particularly with respect to COVID. 93% of mental health services were disrupted or halted critically by COVID worldwide. 4 in 10 adults in the US have reported symptoms of anxiety or depressive disorder, and there's a 24% prevalence of depression during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think it's quite clear that not only during the pandemic we've seen a lot of depression, but there's something coming afterwards that we need to be prepared for. On this slide, the guy on the left is easily the least accomplished or interesting. We've got Mavi Sanchez-Vives, who's a co-founder of Virtual Bodyworks. She's one of the world's leading neuroscientists. And she teamed up with Mel Slater, who's a pioneer in virtual reality. And also part of their team is Bernard Spanlang, who's a computer scientist. And Mel, Anna talked about the ERC grants being the sort of Nobel Prize for scientists. Mel's won 2 of these. And these are for his work in virtual embodiment, which is an arm of virtual reality, which you may or may not have heard of before, but I'll go a bit deeper on that today. Before I talk about exactly what their virtual reality addresses, I want to mention Solomon's paradox. So Solomon's paradox relates to this idea that when we have a personal problem, it goes round and round inside our heads, and it can go on for days or months or years. It can cause you to fall into a depression. When your friend has a problem, they come to you, and you can often quite easily give them advice, or you can see a perspective on their problem that they might not be able to see. And this is called Solomon's paradox, the ability to reason more sensibly about someone else's problem than our own. So what we try and do is use virtual reality to counter this idea of Solomon's paradox. And we do this with embodiment. So embodiment is where you create the illusion in your brain that your virtual body is your real body. So in all our lives, whenever we've looked down at our bodies, we've seen our body, and our brain knows, okay, this is my body. If in virtual reality you put on some VR goggles and you look down and you see a virtual body, your brain falls into that type of thinking. There are other things you can do in VR, such as your virtual hands moving like your real hands, or touches in the real world being replicated in the virtual world, that can also give you this illusion. It's based on something called the rubber hand illusion, which is an experiment in which scientists put a rubber arm, that's the near arm you see next to the back of the head of the person, in the sight of the participant, and their real arm next door, and then touch their rubber hand and the real hand at the same time. At some point, the scientist jams a fork into the rubber hand, and every time the participant screams and pulls their hand away, because the illusion was created that something that wasn't their body is their body. And we do this with virtual bodies. So not just a virtual arm, but a whole virtual body. And what we've found, or what Mel and Mavi found, I should say, is that you can change the virtual body, and you can create a behavioral change or a physical change, or indeed a mental change. And that's what I'll talk about now. So I don't know if you could have guessed how this could have worked in virtual reality to solve Solomon's paradox, but basically what we do is, you sit down in your virtual avatar, you sit opposite a counselor, and you explain a personal problem. You've thought of a problem that's been going around inside your head. Then in one moment you press a button, you leave your virtual body and you embody the counselor. So suddenly, I've blinked, I'm looking across the table and I'm looking at myself, and I'm hearing myself and watching myself explain this problem that was going around in my head as if I'm talking to a friend. And so you have this very strange sense when it happens. You have this feeling that, for me, I feel quite humble, and it makes me think I'm not this complicated beast that I think I am. Actually, I'm just another guy explaining a problem, and you can give advice. So what we've done here is we did a study, and we found that 90% of people who used this technique were able to find new solutions to existing problems that they had and change aspects of their lifestyle as a result. And so you can see that this ability to use virtual reality to leave our bodies, to gain perspective on our issues, can have a really dramatic impact. And when we think about the mental health crisis, with the lack of access to therapies, to be able to use this sort of self-therapy is something that we think is very, very interesting. Another use case, and there are many, many use cases, and I think as a business, this is where we focus most, is trying to understand where we will focus, because the ability to put yourself in a different body, if you've had a stroke, to put yourself in a body that moves perfectly, if you're in chronic pain, to take a painful area and manipulate that area, make it smaller or make it transparent. These are all studies we've done that have shown that it's effective in changing the way we either feel pain or the way we move or the way we think. In the Socrates project, which is a European funding project we're currently doing, we use self-conversation to address obesity. And we can also, the fact that we work with avatars means that we can also manipulate those avatar sizes to change our perception of ourselves as well, or perhaps reveal a version of ourselves that we haven't been able to see just by looking in a mirror. The final thing I'll talk about is around implicit bias. And a lot of mental health, I think the two big topics at the moment are mental health and diversity and inclusion. Over the last years, this has been areas that we've seen a lot of attention, and rightly so. And I think the two are very, very linked. If we live in an inclusive society, I think the mental health of everyone should improve dramatically as well. And embodiment here can play a real part. You can take people and put them in a body of a different race and give them a score that tests, a test that tests your implicit bias beforehand and afterhand. And we've shown now in 4 studies that you will see a statistically significant difference in your implicit bias. So implicit bias is not just your attitudes, are you racist? It's who would you sit next to if you got onto a bus? And if I put myself in an avatar of a different race and feel that body as my own and disrupt any associations that I've built up through socialization about that body, about that color, about the fact that I didn't grow up with someone of that color next to me, and these are all perfectly natural, then you can confound that in a moment and reduce implicit bias. And if you can do this, then you can start to create behavioral change, and I think hopefully start to make the world a little bit better. That's all I had, Julian.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Charlie. Very interesting. I was seeing you, Francesc, looking at Charlie, very interested. What do you think about this? Would you test in your practice in Catalonia?
Well, I was thinking about, for example, mindfulness, meditation, self-compassion. Sometimes it's a good exercise to put distance between oneself and our thoughts, because sometimes people confuse our thoughts with our personality. And this kind of technique, in fact, are helping to this kind of exercise. Also like a self-compassion. No? It is said that if you want to be compassionate with others, first you have to be compassionate with yourself. And I think it is a kind of explanation.
You want to react?
Yeah, it's very interesting talking about compassion and self-compassion. We're currently doing another project where we're running clinical trials on this exact point, because self-compassion is a huge, or lack of it, is a huge contributor to depression. And so we use this technique, and you give a compassionate speech to an avatar who's in distress, and you say nice things and try and make them feel better. And then what we do is we put you in that distressed avatar, and you can hear yourself saying these nice things to you. And that's something that you don't do often. We beat ourselves up. And just hearing yourself be compassionate to you is another interesting way of like breaking this loop of negative behavior.
Sure.
Thank you. We will take some questions from the room. Do you have some question? Raise your hand if so. Meanwhile, I will ask a question to Anna. You were talking about this trial you are launching in US, the home trial on depression with the FDA. Why did you do that in US? Is it possible in Europe as well to launch that? Would you be interested to? We have several hospitals here. Is it something you thought about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reason why Neuroelectrics scaled up to the US was a business reason. We were already deploying our devices to researchers worldwide, and we had a lot of traction in the US. So I always said to entrepreneurs that there has to be a business reason why you scale up, right? So that was our main motivation. But then we started to work with hospitals there, and then we saw that it was good to launch studies there, and then we raised a huge amount of money as a Series A in the US. But we just obtained 3 weeks ago the CE mark as a therapy for post-stroke rehabilitation and neuropathic pain. We have the Hong Kong certificate as a medical device, as a therapy, also in Canada. So, you know, the call out to entrepreneurs out there is, if there are patients that suffer around the globe, why do we need to stay Barcelona, Spanish, European? Sure. I mean, you have to be ambitious on the positive sense. I mean, it is our commitment to help every patient, whatever it is. And I think it has been really good for Neuroelectrics to scale up to the US. I was last week in France with President Macron at Vivatech, and they're launching an amazing initiative to scale up European companies. We need bigger startups to compete with Asia and the US. So I don't particularly like this debate whether, are you in the US, are you in Europe, I mean, we have to be global companies and compete in the champions. So, I think that is the way we are looking at our companies as a global player, but deep tech in a responsible way. I think there are some ethics and some way to grow companies in Europe that are different from other territories, and I think that's our opportunity.
Yeah. Well, sure. Well, actually, in the session before, Gemma was telling us that US is taking advance on responsible technology and ethics, ethical technology as well. So sometimes we don't have the a priori ideas that are right in this case. Thank you, Emma. Any question from the room? Yeah, we have 2, 3. Whoa. Everybody wake up now. Please.
Thank you for the interesting presentations. I have a question regarding the VR. How in practice will it be applied as a therapeutic tool?
Yeah, so we see this as ultimately, we hope it can be something that can relieve pressure on healthcare systems and reduce some of that backlog of patients who want to receive mental health. On the other hand, I also think it's important with these types of technologies that they're properly tested in clinical trials with all different types of patients, and that we don't get overexcited when it comes to digital health and say, this worked in one environment, now let's let everyone use it no matter what could be going on. So to give you an example, we're running studies with people with schizophrenia and seeing how having a self-conversation affects that. And we really don't know. I mean, it has a different effect on everyone who does it. And so, yeah, ultimately we hope it can be a home therapy, a bit like Anna was describing today, but there are certain steps that I think startups need to go through to get to that point, and it's important to do so to keep the public's trust in digital health and that sort of stuff.
Thank you. Another question we have here at the bottom.
Thank you so much for your fascinating presentations. I have one very short question to Anna and then one to Charlie. Anna, what are the rest sensors that you are using in your headset? It's EEG. You also were mentioning certainly MRI in the clinical studies, but is there any other sort of neurobiofeedbacks that you measure?
No, so our technology, the one that I have shown, is really collecting EEG, as you have precisely described, so the electrical activity, your brain waves. But we also use on the stimulation side, transcranial current stimulation, which is a sort of non-invasive electrical stimulation. So this is mainly the technology we use at the company, and we want to do this kind of closed loop EEG and transcranial current stimulation. So that's basically what we are working on.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you. Charlie, and I tremendously adored your approach towards repositioning these principles, like using NLP techniques. And are you planning in future also implementing RPT, like rapid personal transformation, where you can dive even deeper into the instincts and beliefs with the avatars?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, there's many, many different places we can go with this. And so my job, we have our labs in the University of Barcelona and then in hospital clinic. And they do a lot of research. And so they're doing stuff like researching smoking cessation. So having a conversation with your future self and understanding how you're able to quit smoking and moving between your two selves and this sort of thing, which is something that I did a couple of months ago and have quit smoking doing it. With regards to your specific use case, we're not looking at it at the moment, but it's another one of these areas where I think if you talk to our psychologists, they'd probably love to explore it a bit more if we had all the time and resources at our disposal.
Thank you, Charlie. We have another question here.
I have. Thank you for your talk. Impressive, really, and great job for just what you did in just 10 years. It's impressive, really. And I have just a question for you about the, let's say, the difference between what we are looking right now, for example, with the Elon Musk, but just because he's mainstream, let's say, but we know that he's just the last one that pops out from this market that, of course, he didn't invent. Someone else did it before him. And my question is about the invasiveness, let's say, and the amount of quantity that you can retrieve from the brain. And my main point is about, let's say, what do you think about, or better, how neuroelectrics is placed on a market where you can find both, let's say, invasive and non-invasive electrodes in this case to collect the signal, but also to deliver some stimulation that might be intracortical or, like in your case, transcranial. So what do you think about that? Which are the limitations, and how Neuroelectrics is placed in this big market that targets the same issues, let's say, the same neurological disorders, but with many different techniques? Thanks.
Yeah, really good question. I think that we are non-invasive technology, so we have some limitations. For example, I doubt we will ever be able to target Parkinson's because the nodes of the disease are in profound areas of the brain. So it's pretty likely that we cannot access those nodes. So there are limitations in our technology. I think it's a very interesting debate because there is invasive and non-invasive. So I think that some patients will have to go invasive for sure because we are limited, right? But then there is the fantastic debate whether are you consumer or medical, right? So to bring it to Elon Musk, right? So we as a company, I always say that the founders and the companies, we drive where we want our companies to go. And we actively as entrepreneurs decided we wouldn't go consumer. We decided to go medical, right? And I think that's part of the ethical debate that we were discussing before, right? I think Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, who just invested in another invasive technology, are coming into neurotech, which I think is fantastic because they brought the spotlight into neurotech in ways it wasn't possible before, right? But I think the ethical debate is, we've seen what happened with Facebook, right? Social media, how we think we are being manipulated by social media. Just imagine for a second, you're going to have an implanted device on your brain as a brain-computer interface. So I'm already quite an old person compared to the millennials. I know I wouldn't let anybody implant a device on my brain and have access to my brain data. But wait a minute, what about millennials? What about the new generations? They may have a different set of skills. So I love to participate in neuroethics debates because the question is, who's going to control your brain data? You know, in the case of Elon Musk, it's reading. For the moment, it's not stimulating, right? So who's going to have access to that data, and what is that data going to tell you? So I think it's fascinating times for neurotech. Specifically, are governments going to step in and regulate? This is going to be a free market. So I think that it is really an interesting debate and will generate, you will see a lot of, I think, new regulations probably. But I'm very curious to see how Elon Musk and especially Peter Thiel are going to bring this to the consumer space. But remember, it's implantable. So you have to, as a human, you'll have to let people implant something, and how that will change what it means to be human, it's going to be incredible because the brain defines you as a human today. So, you know, messing up with the brain, I think is a serious issue. That's why at Neuroelectrics, we didn't have the courage to play with your brain. We are only helping to heal your brain. But others are trying it, so I'm very curious to see what's going to happen.
You said courage?
Well, or craziness, but you know, he's also launching rockets to space. I gave him,
it was my question.
I give him credit, you know, so.
Sure. Bit provoking. We will take a last question. We have this gentleman in the middle.
Hi, I would like to thank you very much for your talk. Really fascinating that you are going to help us in our health. So I just wanted to ask a question about, you talk about you're successful and how the result is going now. It's very cool now. But I would like to ask about the hard time, the obstacles that you have faced to start the company, how you start the idea, how you create it, and till now, till this stage that you are here successfully talking about your startup.
Well, maybe Francesc and Charlie can complement, but don't let people fool you. I mean, when we talk about success on stage, any of us or what we have done, it's plenty of failures and suffering, right? So I don't think the life of an entrepreneur is as glamorous and as, you know, as we may pretend. It's plenty of failures and no's, right? I raise money, but you can't imagine the amount of hard time and people being mean to me that I went through. So I think that it's the difference between an entrepreneur is that you really are resilient. So when people tell you to your face that you're a woman and you're not going to raise capital, that you have a Spanish accent and you will not raise capital, or that your ideas will never work, at the moment you're like, oh, qué bofetada. But then you wake up next morning and you say, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to keep on going. So I think that's the lesson for entrepreneurs. We always have failures, people saying no, but we just find a way, we don't give up. So Charlie?
Thank you, Anna. Charlie, you wanted to react on that?
I would briefly add, I think resilience is definitely the greatest skill you need as an entrepreneur. And not to be too affected when the bad things happen or when the good things happen, because you can create lots of luck and you get a bit of luck. Yesterday we won a grant and life seems really good, but I know tomorrow a bomb might arrive and we'll have to defuse it. So I think trying to keep yourself on an even keel is quite important.
I suppose you agree, it's very important to have a vision and follow the vision and also work with your strengths. What do you think about?
Yeah, I think that, I often tell to young people that you need to listen to your inner voice. I mean, is what you're doing important to you? Is it aligned with your values? Because if you're creating a company for the right reasons and they're aligned with what you are, you will persevere. If you're creating a company to become rich, to work less for the wrong reasons, you'll have a miserable life. So no matter how hard life will be or obstacles, you'll always believe in what you do, right? So I think that perseverance is coming from a deeper place. So I think that's why I adore entrepreneurs in general.
Thank you very much to the three of you to join us in this session. Thank you very much.